Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. So please kindly wait for order to join in the next couple of minutes. Then we will start. Thank you. Hello, everyone again. Thank you for waiting and thank you for joining our webinar. So hope you all have good evening. My name is Hương Nguyên and I'm from Employer Branding Team of DXC Luxoft. And today I will be a moderator for our webinar. And before we start, I would like to remind you during our webinar, if you have any question for our speaker, kindly raise your question via Q&A box. Kindly raise your question via Q&A box, which is located at the bottom of our Zoom windows. And please do not use chat box as our speaker might miss to answer your questions. And at the end of our webinar, we will have a lucky draw. One lucky participation stand for a chance to win the JBL Go 3, and the other 5 lucky participants will have a chance to win our Luxoft backpacks. And I will pass the task to Madhu, our Managing Director for Luxoft ABAC. And Madhu, the stage is yours now.
Thank you, Huang. Am I audible?
Yeah, please.
Okay. All right. So good evening and welcome to all of you to this wonderful evening and short session from Luxoft. It's been a pleasure to host all of you as one of the leaders of Luxoft in India. My name is Madhusudan Deshpande, shortly called as Madhu. I'm the Managing Director for India and Asia Pacific region. Have been associated with Luxoft for the last 3 years and then have been part of this growth journey that we have in Luxoft. So with that introduction, I hope all of you are safe and keeping yourself in a safe environment to make sure that you are all living happily, living positively, and living passionately with you, yourselves, and your families, and also are able to support the surroundings and then the ecosystem to make sure everybody is able to feel safe and secure as well as healthy in this current situation, right? With that note, I would like to give you a quick overview of what Luxoft is all about and then where do we belong in DXC Technologies. And we also, I also want to take you through Luxoft India story and the journey. And then we will ask others in the panel, Balaji, Giri, and Mrudal, to give you a lot more technical content on what we do in some of our domains that we are working on currently, right? With that agenda, another request, as Huang said, please do make sure you write your questions in Q&A box. Chat box we will get missed. So Q&A box would help us to focus on attending to all your questions. And our intent is to make sure that you learn as much as we would like to learn from you through your Q&A. Right, with that, welcome to the session. And let me just quickly move on and then talk to you about what Luxoft is all about. Luxoft as a company is currently positioned across the globe as a software engineering partner to provide several digital solutions that drive business change. When I talk about business change, we intend to work with our customers to define what is the business value that we bring to our customers. At the same time, how customer is getting benefited with our partnership. We think along with our customers when we define the business value. Once we identify and then understand what is the business value at which we are engaging with our customers, we work with them to build the roadmap, the digital roadmaps or their product roadmaps, or we engage with them in creating the blueprints as to how they would want to see their journey from point A to point B in their digital transformation. This is where we create the blueprints, we create the reference platforms for a digital mapping with our customers. Once we created this map, we engage with them to provide engineering solutions and then the offerings at various levels of participation with them, either starting from consulting them to go from point A to point B in their journey, or we work with them in building the applications or the products that are necessary for them to engage in their journey of their customers. And also we engage with them in accelerating the scale by having distributed teams across the globe that we have in Luxoft. This is what Luxoft does as a philosophy. We are a software engineering company. We call ourselves as partner for several of our customers, and then we continue to engage with them for long-term relationships. Having said that, I'm sure all of you may be aware of DXC acquiring Luxoft a year and a half ago. Precisely in January, the intent was announced. And then in the month of June 2019 is when the actual acquisition happened. So in about a year and a half to 2 years, we have been working on a journey along with DXC. DXC is a very large corporate which comes with lot of experience across the enterprise technology stack in running the business, be it modernizing the mainstream IT or integrating the digital technologies into mainstream IT, working with the CIOs of several of our customers. They have been extremely good at running the business, while Luxoft has been phenomenally involved in changing the business. That means when we work with our customers, we put ourselves in the customer shoes and then try and look at what is the value and the benefit that we are bringing in clients' life cycle of their products or their customer experiences or their journey in the industry. This is where Luxoft believes we are adding value in being their digital engineering and advanced technologies partner. And we would like to enrich and enhance the digital experience of our customers through our expertise that we bring based on several industry-focused solutions and offerings that we bring, and we work with several industry verticals, which I will talk about it in a minute. DXC has been, DXC Luxoft, I would say, has been a pioneer in acquiring unique talent or the software engineering talent with the niche skills and then work on some of the cutting edge technology as well as the new products and platforms that are coming into the market through our customers. We have been exceptionally focused on client focus. The client's need come as a priority, be it a problem statement or a need for a help or need for a partnership. So we focus on customers and engage our employees or our consultants who are also of similar understanding, and then they build the culture of associating with the clients to ensure that we deliver what we commit to our customers. To make it happen, we engage with our consultants and engineers with our customers across the globe. in an agile fashion, and we continue to work on the innovation of some of our customers' products and processes platforms as well. Quick overview of different industries that we work upon within Luxoft. Financial services has been the biggest revenue engine for Luxoft globally. Up to about 48 to 50% of our revenue comes from financial services. Automotive domain is the next big thing, where it generates roughly about 25 to 30% of our revenue. And digital engineering is the other horizontal, what we call it as the digital transformation for several of our customers, is domain agnostic services that we render by acquiring top-notch industry experiences and talents into our company. When we do that, there are several other industries that we work with in the company, be it media and communication, or the healthcare like Novartis, AT&T as a technology company. We work with several retail and logistics customers like Nestle, Ahold, and you name quite a few of them are all top-notch, top Fortune 500 companies across the globe. We work with several manufacturing companies. For example, in aerospace, we work with Boeing. We work with Daimler in automotive, and we work with several travel and hospitality customers like Expedia. And then we work with several technology companies, including some of the silicon vendors like Intel, AMD, NVIDIA, and several other customers like Qualcomm and all that stuff. So this is the industry experience that we have in-house, and then we continue to work with Fortune 500 companies across the globe. What we bring to table when we work with our customers, so we believe in having the deep domain expertise with our digital excellence. And as I mentioned, we have the diverse team across the globe with several delivery centers, close to around 40 plus delivery centers we have across the globe, apart from our customers, our consultants engaged with our customers in their premises as well. So we have been able to bring those solutions at scale. And because of the way we engage with our customers creatively, we also bring that agility to make sure we are relevant to what customers are looking for. And we have acquired exceptional software talent in the market. You would get an opportunity to work with us and then also work with several industry leading talent and subject matter expertise across the globe. And we have been constantly excelling in our delivery. We take complex projects. We believe in taking quite a lot of challenging and advanced technology projects. While we take those things for several of our requirements, we excel in our delivery. We invest in our teams. And then we have a very strong partnership ecosystem. In today's world, collaborating with partners is a must to make sure we are using the latest technology that our partners bring to several of our industries where we are working on to enable our customers to have what is the latest. So we believe in strong partnership ecosystem. To name a few, we work with several strategic partners like Azure, Amazon's, who are bringing the latest cloud technologies into the market, to Pega from a business process management perspective. We work with Intel, as I mentioned, and then Appian and Oracle and several of them as strategic partners. We work with several industry partners. So in financial services, say, for example, we work with Murex, Calypso, and Avaloq for various needs in the financial services. I'm sure my colleagues in the team today in the panel will talk about what are all the different things that we do with them in financial services. Apart from that, we are a constant member of some of the advancement that is happening in AUTOSAR, advancement that is happening with ISO 26262. And we are also part of defining some of the standards that are required in automotive industry. Apart from engaging with several of other industry partners, like we associate with LG, we have a joint venture that we have established to bring WebOS Auto into automotive industry, into the cars for either the digital cockpit or the front panels or the HMIs, or also to the rear seat entertainment system. So these are all some examples to say how we are leveraging these partnerships. Apart from that, we work with several technology and then the digital partners to provide services to our customers. Coming to a snapshot of what we have in Asia Pacific region, India has been the biggest concentration of delivery center for us. We have close to around 1,200 people now in India who are working for various customers across the globe, apart from supporting some of the Indian needs as well for some of our Indian customers. We do have delivery centers in Malaysia and then in Vietnam, where we have the delivery centers which are focused on having certain ODCs for automotive domain to tap the talent that are available in these regions. And we work with several customers in Australia, Singapore, Hong Kong, and South Korea. We are building another center in South Korea at this point in time to support one of our automotive customers, and we would expand it for other customers as well as we establish that in South Korea. And then China is a market that we are constantly focusing on to look at what is the growth that is happening in automotive industry and how we can leverage this growing Chinese market in the new technologies, either in electric vehicles or in the connected mobility area, and leverage the benefit of working with several other Western, European, and then American customers, and then bring that technology into China, as well as we are in the leading edge of technological requirements in automotive domain. So China is a large focus for us at this point in time, and we constantly are growing in the last 1 to 2 years in China. Coming specific to India as a country, you can see that we have started our operations as Luxoft India in 2017. Luxoft acquired a company by name Derive IT Technologies in 2016. Upon acquisition, we had the base of some core competency in Murex, which is what was the base for us to start building our strategy, building our growth plans for India in 2017. 2017 is when Luxoft India was formed. And when we started in the year 2018 March, we were roughly about 103 people. And today, in roughly 3 years and then 4 months, I would say, we are almost 1,200 people. We continue to grow year on year 100% for the last 3 years. And then we have a similar pattern that I see from a growth perspective in 2022, this fiscal year as well. We support close to around 46 different clients across the globe from India today. And as part of DXC, we are part of a large family where DXC has close to around 40,000 people, and then they're servicing almost 650 people, 650 customers. And if you look at the demography and then the geography where we are located, Luxoft offices are in Bangalore, and then we have started another office in Pune as a strategic location. Our operations will start as soon as this pandemic is over. During this pandemic time, we had an opportunity to build the team. We already have close to around 60 to 70 member team already hired in Pune for Pune Center, and they would be working in Pune as soon as the office is open. As of now, considering the current pandemic situation, we keep our offices closed. It is announced till December, end of this calendar year. Employee safety is very important for us, and I'm sure all of you are going through a lot of anxiety of what is happening in the market in India. We are cautiously monitoring and then maintaining our stand of ensuring employee safety first, while we are enabling our employees to work where they are remotely to ensure that we are able to meet customer demands, and then we have been successful so far. On the right side, what you can see is a broad mix of the talent that we have in the company. As I said, we started with Murex as one of the capacities that we had, and then the capability as a base when we started in 2017. And now you can see that there is an equal distribution of several other platform related talent that we have acquired, and then several other development engineers that we have today, well enabled with a good quality management, who are all part of this building this strategy. And then the growth that you see is because of an excellent leadership team that we have in ensuring we meet client expectations, as well as we have the right understanding of employee connect to make sure we connect with our people as well. The bottom, what you see are the broad spectrum of the industry or the sub-industry specializations that we have acquired and then we have in the company as of today. And you will hear a lot more about banking and capital markets in the next session. What we bring to our employees is an opportunity for them to work on some of the cutting edge technologies or the specialized skills that they bring to solve some of our customer problems. We believe that we engage with our people to give them kind of a startup environment. So we believe in being lean and a flat hierarchy, and we are a listening organization. We would like to listen to our employees and ensure that we are able to do what best we can to connect with our people, while we ensure that our employees are doing what is best needed for meeting the client satisfaction. Internal mobility is one of the things, as I mentioned, across 22 countries, we have 45 offices. We have an opportunity for our people to migrate and then work in any of these delivery centers, depending on the need and then the matching skills and then their ability to build their own career, as well as the technology that they are learning upon. We have global teams that you work with, the experts from industries across the globe, be it in banking and financial services or in automotive or in several other industries that you saw. And there are several trainings and then the platforms that are available for you to learn and then make sure that you are constantly updating your own skills and work with us. Moving on. So this is a journey that we follow in India and across Luxoft. So individual's life cycle and then the career progression is very important for us. Once you're onboarded, there is a constant endeavor from our HR department to engage with the employees, either through engagement and then the satisfaction surveys, and also do several mood monitoring and also engage with them on a survey to get proper feedback into the system and identify areas for improvement for the company to constantly learn and enable our employees to deliver the best to our customers. There is a standard appraisal cycle for the rest of the activities that has to happen. I'm sure you're all experienced enough to understand the rest of the cycle, but we believe that we want to constantly engage with our employees like we do with our customers to engage with them from day one till they exist in the industry. Even after, if at all, there was a need for them to leave the company, we always continue to retain constant touch with them to make sure that we give them an opportunity for them to come back. So there have been several instances where people have left us, have come back and then rejoined us again. So we believe having a constant touch and then ensuring that a good engagement with our employees is a key for successful organization. With that, I would like to thank all of you to join this, and then I would leave it to our panelists to take it forward. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions through Q&A.
Thank you so much, Madhu. Now let's moving on. I would like to introduce Balaji. Balaji is our Senior Director at DXC Luxoft India and is also Head of Digital Delivery Strategy and Solution for Banking and Capital Market in APAC region. So let's welcome Balaji.
Thanks a lot, Huang. Hope you are able to hear me clearly and see my screen as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good evening to one and all. I'm Balaji, and I really hope that all of you are up with a cup of hot coffee, because we are now going to dig deep into one of the hottest topics in the industry today, which is cloud transformation. And in this particular session, we will try to find an answer to a very interesting question, right? When an organization is trying to adopt cloud technologies, is it an ordeal for that organization? Which means, is it very challenging or it is trivial? That means it's easy. Okay. And why we are even talking of being trivial? So for a moment, let's reflect upon the way cloud technologies have integrated into our day-to-day life very seamlessly, right? Let me give you some examples. None of us probably today can survive without, say, a Netflix or an Amazon Prime or Hotstar, right? All these OTT services are heavily banking upon cloud technology, right? Our various voice assistants, Google, Siri, Alexa, they're all based on analytic solutions which work based on cloud technology, right? And the particular context for this session is on the banking and capital markets, BCM. So a mobile banking application, for example, is something that we use day in and day out. And a lot of that works based on a cloud backbone. So as you can see from all these examples, very consciously, subconsciously, whichever way you call it, we are using a lot of cloud services in our day-to-day life, right? Probably sometimes even without realizing. So that at some points can make us feel that probably should be trivial. So let's see in the rest of the session whether it's trivial or it's ordeal. But before I jump in, quickly to clarify a few terms, right? So we will be talking about the context of the BCM organizations that we call as banks, and they are our clients as DXC Luxoft. And then the clients of these banks we refer to as end clients. So just to keep that in mind as we move along. Okay, so let's look at what are the key drivers for a bank to look at adopting cloud technologies today, right? So I already gave an example of, say, a mobile banking application or Netflix and so on kind of services. Today, we know that there is an inherent expectation that these services should work no matter which part of the world we are. And they should work with our subscription, our credentials. And the only requirement is we should have internet connectivity, right? So apply the same thing to a BCM context, right? So banks which are delivering products and services to their clients, the end clients, that expectation prevails with these end clients as well, right? So the banks have to ensure that they have a worldwide reach. Their products can work from anywhere in the world, and they also need to think about scalability, right? I'll just give a simple example, right? If you take a simple Netflix service, for example, usually you can see that on weekdays, the usage can really surge around the evening and late nights, whereas it may be on the lower side in the morning and afternoons or maybe early evenings when we are quite busy with our work and we may probably not be doing Netflix, right? So there can be multiple fluctuations, and in the usage patterns, the banks have to ensure they meet them, but at the same time, they have to be economic. It has to be cost effective, right? The second aspect is today we are very used to omnipresent business applications, which means that the user experience, the emotional connect that we have with these applications, no matter whether we use them from a desktop, a laptop, a mobile, a tablet, and so on, we expect a consistent experience, right? For example, in our mobile banking application. So the focus on digital user experience is very high, and banks have to consistently meet these expectations to make the customers happy. Now, once we have such omnipresent services, the reliability and resiliency aspects go up a lot. So imagine if, let's say, an Amazon shopping app is down even for a few minutes in a day. You can see how much of a disaster it would be, right? Extend the same thought to our mobile banking application on our smartphones. If it is down even for a few minutes, especially when we as clients would like to do some critical transactions on our account, it could be a disaster, right? It severely impacts the credibility of the bank. So reliability is very important. Resiliency is very important. There has to be auto failovers, instant failovers, right? So that the services don't suffer. And at the same time, COVID has taught us a lesson that gone are those days when such products and services can be delivered from within an office building, right? So they have actually pushed to the greatest extent or extremes the need for omnipresence and access from anywhere in the world, like work from home, right? There were some questions around work from home as well in the questions. Okay, now the other important aspect is the moment we become global, naturally we have a strong focus on compliance and security. Think of all the wars that are going on, say between the government and Twitter, with the Facebooks, the Googles. I think data protection is of prime importance, no matter whether we are speaking of banking as a sector or other industries, right? So banks have to ensure that their products are compliant and secure for users to use. Now, while banks are trying to deliver all these features in their products and services, they also have to focus on their IT backbone. These are the IT teams and the IT infrastructure, right? And that would be a larger focus for us in the rest of this session. So the IT infrastructure, the IT ecosystem, they have to continuously focus to ensure it is simplified. So what we mean by that is today, the ability of a bank to deliver innovative features to the end clients depends on how efficient their IT backbone is. And that's what we call as time to market to deliver features to clients. And this is where banks have to think of adopting technologies like DevOps and so on to ensure that they have a good IT backbone, which is efficient. And finally, in the extremely competitive world today, it's very important that banks consistently innovate. They have to be innovative in the way they deliver features across multiple platforms with a consistent experience. They have to be innovative in the way they can predict the needs of their clients by leveraging some analytics, so on and so forth, right? So in summary, these are multiple drivers, which I would say define the essence of how a bank has to do its business. And I think that pretty much applies to even other industries. And the good news is that there is an answer or a solution for all these requirements in cloud solutions. So let's see how it works. So let's peek for a moment into typically how the enterprise landscape for a bank looks like. Okay, and I would like to mention here that we cannot compare banks with Amazons, Googles, Apples of the world, because these organizations were born as technology leaders. But banks are not technology leaders. They're not supposed to be technology leaders, right? They are business leaders. So banks have grown over ages, years, to deliver business functions, business products to clients. So it is quite natural that they would be having legacy technologies in their landscape. So as you can see in the top here, there are many banks that still struggle with physical on-prem data centers, siloed data across various departments, mainframe or strongly coupled monolithic kind of applications. The users within the bank, the employees who are more used to desktop kind of experience rather than mobile, right? One example is the concept of trading. Many of the banks basically in the capital market space, they have their employees who are traders and they consistently trade, right? And of course, we all trade. So today, probably trading from a mobile application is common, but there are banks where still we could have these traders who are more used to desktop kind of experience. Many of the banks use traditional business intelligence tools like Cognos or business objects and so on. And the business model and organization structure in many of the banks are still traditional. And I'll touch a little more on this in the next slide when we talk about what actually we mean by the ordeal in this transformation, right? So this is what we can expect in a technology landscape for a bank. And already you would have started realizing why it seems to be more an ordeal rather than trivial, right? Because it's not easy to modernize this landscape to be able to leverage the modern cloud services, right? But more or less, most of the banks have started realizing that they better proactively transform. Otherwise, they will be forced to because of the competition which is getting ahead in this space, right? So before we look into how this ordeal exactly pans out for a bank when they try to transform, into cloud technology adoption, let's take a quick look at typically what the journey looks like for a bank from today in their current legacy state to the state where they have adopted cloud. What's the journey? And one point I want to highlight here is some of you may think, why don't we just call this as migration? The more common term is cloud migration. Why we are calling transformation? So as we go through this session, you will realize that cloud adoption calls for a major organization change management within a bank, because it requires the business processes to transform, the technical processes to transform, the architecture to transform, the ways of working to transform. And that's the most interesting part, right? And that's why we call it as a transformation rather than a migration. So what's the first step in the transformation journey? It is very important for banks to identify what are their business goals. And I'll spend a bit more time on this in the next slide. But for now, just understand that the banks have to think about what they're trying to achieve as a business. And I think many of these drivers we saw in the previous slide. And while banks start reflecting and we help them with our experience to identify what are their business goals, it's also important for us to understand their current landscape in more detail. And there are many solutions from these large cloud vendors like Amazon, Google, Azure, and so on, which I will refer to in a bit, which will help us assess their application portfolio. Because end of the day, this is important for you to note that when we transform to cloud, essentially what we are doing is we are migrating, or we can say deploying their applications onto cloud platforms, right? And many times you'll also hear this term called as workload. So why we call it as a workload is because it's not just the application, but the application with its ecosystem, the network, the storage, the databases, the platforms, and so on, right? So at the end of the first stage, we have identified their objectives. We have identified what are the critical success factors to meet their objectives. The next step, obviously, is to analyze their application portfolio and design the right target state for the bank. And what we mean by the right target state is essentially what will be the configuration of this cloud infrastructure in terms of very rudimentary aspects like network, storage, servers, databases, technologies, the monitoring aspects, so on and so forth, right? So we have to arrive at that target state. And this we do by analyzing this portfolio. And this analysis also delivers something called as a 6R analysis, which I will cover in the next slide, which basically tells for the existing applications how they would look like in the target state and what we need to do to move them to the target state. So once the design is complete, another important aspect before we reach that completion is we have to choose the right cloud vendor, right? So basically, these are the managed services vendors, as I mentioned earlier, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Azure, and they take care of a lot of the infrastructure and the ecosystem requirements in the target state. We have to look at the objectives of the bank and map the right cloud vendor. And many times what we have seen is actually one single vendor may not be able to fulfill all the objectives, and the banks may end up getting into what we call a multi-cloud environment where they have to engage on solutions from multiple cloud vendors to meet their objectives. So whatever it is, we arrive at a design. The next step is we have to build this target architecture, right? And a very important aspect here is we can never say that we will get to the exactly correct target state right in the first go. And that's because the banks have a lot of expectations, as you saw in the key drivers, around security, reliability, performance, latency, the rich solutions that cloud vendors provide. And it's simply not possible to predict how the target state will behave along these aspects right up front. So that's why in this core architecture build and iteration, we have to iterate building of this target state. And what we do many a times is we do some proof of concepts where, let's say they have 100 applications to migrate. We may take 5 of them, 10 of them as a good representation of that portfolio. We may actually migrate them to the target state first, see whether they're meeting the business requirements. There are some gaps. We go back to the drawing board to redesign. And this is something very common, which happens in this journey to transform to cloud. Now, once we have done this iteration and we have arrived at the right size for all the various infrastructure resource requirements, then we have to think about deploying. Now, before we go to the deploy stage, one of the things that we strongly encourage banks to do is adopt infrastructure as a code approach. These can be achieved by leveraging products like Terraform, Ansible, Packer, which in the simplest terms allow us to define the configuration of a data center as a simple script, something like even JSON, right? It helps us provision this infrastructure as a code and then version control them and maintain them. And this is very useful because it actually gives it a very, very efficient look at the end of it, rather than the way we look at physical infrastructure, right? So once this design is done, the build is done, we go on to deploy, and this is where the actual migration of the workloads happen. And the 6R that I mentioned about how the applications would look like in the target state, we have to implement that model, and we'll dig a bit deeper into that next. Once the deployment has happened, the workloads or the applications are migrated to the target state, then we have to look at the productionization of the same. Now, one very important aspect before we move to the production is that the deployment actually involves a lot of focus around leveraging innovative solutions from cloud vendors for automating this migration. And the other aspect is when there are multiple cloud solutions involved, we have to look at various solutions to manage this multi-cloud environment in the target state, right? So after those things have been taken care, we then move to the post-production operations and governance. And this is essentially the continuous monitoring of this target state, this target infrastructure, target ecosystem, continuously look for optimization opportunities, automate the provisioning of infrastructure, the scale in and scale out as required, generate the performance reports, observe the network performance, application performance. There are so many aspects, right? Manage the incidents that are happening, and so on and so forth, right? So when we actually design the target architecture, we also have to keep in mind the operations and governance. So this is a quick snapshot of how typically the journeys. Probably I have given you a 50,000 view. Each of these are theories and practicals and so on themselves, but I think this should have given you a quick perspective. So now let's look at what's the ordeal, right? So we understand how the landscape looks like. We understood, at least at a high level, the journey, how it looks like. What are the challenges? Let's look at that. The very first challenge is that banks always struggle to understand that their technology goals around cloud adoption has to be driven by business goals, right? So for example, if a bank today comes and says that I want to be a cloud first bank, right? Everything and anything that I do, I have cloud technology, it can fail, right? Because the banks have to look at what they're trying to achieve. And I'll give you 2-3 quick examples, right? If a bank is focused more on delivering rich mobile applications to their clients on multiple smartphone and mobile platforms, they should leverage the edge computing solutions available from the cloud vendors, right? That's the priority. Right? If a bank is focused more around IT simplification, that means they're more worried about streamlining and increasing the efficiency of their IT backbone, they have to focus more around the DevOps and automation solutions that are provided by the cloud vendors, right? So in summary, the bank has to really focus on what's their business goal. And I'm not saying that not all these are important, right? But any bank at any point of time is living with a constrained budget. They don't have extensive budget to achieve all this in a big bang approach. So they have to prioritize. And that's what we help them. We help them identify what's the key business goal of top priority to start with, and then map the corresponding cloud solutions, which will give them the maximum benefit. Cultural change. Yeah, I think as I was mentioning earlier as well, many of the banks still operate in traditional model or ways of working. So let me give you some examples, right? Today, we talk a lot about agile ways of working, where business has to be closely working with IT to deliver products to the end clients of the bank. Even today, that doesn't necessarily happen. And I can give you a couple of examples, right? There are still long drawn approval processes, for example, in banks to provision infrastructure, right? To promote code from one environment to the other, right? Even today, business many times feels that if they have a requirement, they should give that requirement to IT and wait for IT to deliver, rather than focusing on self-service. For example, many of the business users want to look at various business reports, right? Today, we live in an age where self-visualization or self-service analytics is the name of the game. which is delivered by many of the products like Microsoft Azure, Power BI, or Amazon QuickSight, and so on, right? But there are many banks where the users are simply not tuned to this kind of a self-service approach, right? So there are many such traditional behaviors from banks, and this needs help in doing an organization transformation. And that's where, again, we bring our expertise as DXC Luxoft and help banks through educations, through various other means, which we can help them come over this cultural change. Another very important aspect of culture is there is an inherent fear, right? In the pre-cloud stage, the entire infrastructure is within the bank. So they know the static IP, for example, right? Their IT teams have complete control on the infrastructure. The moment they have to think about moving to a cloud vendor, they know the very moment that, oh, now it's becoming a managed services. It could become like a black box, right? So they have the fear of security vulnerabilities, right? They have multiple fears in terms of loss of control. They have fear in terms of data protection and breaches. So these are all the various cultural changes. But let me tell you, we'll also speak in the next slide a bit more. There are such wonderful solutions available from the cloud vendors today where all such concerns can be addressed. Okay. Another key challenge is that many of the banks say, I am very monolithic and complex today. I don't think I have enough funds to be able to manage this modernization, right? There are a multitude of solutions of how we can help banks even modernize a very legacy estate, including mainframe kind of estates, and still adopt cloud technologies. We'll touch upon that, right? And basically that also has an implication around cost. Banks feel that it may be very expensive. There may not be a return on investment. So let's not go for cloud transformation, right? We already spoke about the challenges around security, reliability. Let me spend a few seconds on complex hybrid target state. So I have seldom seen a bank which can go 100% on cloud, right? I think many of you will appreciate that banks live in a severe regulatory state. There are many regulatory obligations from various governance bodies, other bodies that banks have to comply. And because of that, many times they are not able to go 100% on cloud. So the target state for many of the banks would always be a hybrid state, right? Which would be a combination of on-prem applications and on-cloud applications. And this could make many of the banks hesitate to transform, right? Another challenge is that today it's very overwhelming for anybody, not just banks, to look at the number of function as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, function as a service, whatnot, right? From every cloud vendor, right? So it can be very overwhelming. It's an explosion of services. They may not be able to decide exactly what fits their bill, what they really need as a bank, right? I have already spoken about data complexity in terms of silos and so on. And we also spoke about multi-cloud, where it may become challenging to manage a multi-cloud environment, right? So in summary, these are all, I would say, the mental blocks or the initial hurdles that banks would face before they can decide as an organization to adopt cloud. So let's see what are the solutions for these. For each of these challenges, we have multiple solutions, and this is what helps us move towards trivial from what the previous slide indicated to you as ordeal. When it comes to deciding the right business goals, the very first step is we cannot separate business from IT. So it needs techno-functional capability, and that's what we as DXC Luxoft are proud about, right? So we combine the banking and capital markets domain experience along with technology experience, and we are able to educate and guide our customers, the banks, in terms of how to look at a combined perspective to decide on the right business goals. Apart from that, we also enjoy a lot of experience from our various engagements in the BCM space. We have actually done enterprise cloud transformation for many of our clients. So we bring those insights, those lessons learned and best practices. And we also have very good engagements with directly the cloud vendors like the Amazon, Google, and so on. And that experience, that knowledge also helps us provide the right insights to the banks to arrive at the right business goals and then the mapped technology goals. Of course, I already mentioned that we live in a world of digital user experience. So we also have a lot of blueprints with us. For example, for a trading application, right, from any platform, we do have accelerators and ready-made blueprints which can be customized for banks, right? So in summary, all this experience that we have can help banks arrive at the right business goals mapped to the technology goals. Now let's focus on how to address this current complex monolithic state. The very first step is we have to look at certain core design principles. And the very first step in that sub-step, so to say, is that we have to take a decision together with the bank, which of the applications are going to remain on-prem, which can move to cloud. And this depends on various factors, in terms of the most important being that if we have to manage a hybrid target state, which means some applications on-prem, some applications on cloud, the cloud vendors have specified certain requirements or prerequisites to have such a hybrid architecture. For example, if you look at Microsoft Azure, right, they have a solution for this hybrid state called as Azure Stack. So what Azure Stack says is that there are certain standard hardware vendors like Dell, IBM, and the physical server infrastructure or the virtual server infrastructure for on-prem, that certain versions are specifically highlighted by Microsoft and only those are supported, right? So the client has to ensure that their on-prem applications are deployed on such hardware, right? Similarly, there are specifications on what versions of operating systems on-prem can be supported by the cloud vendors if we have to operate them in a hybrid architecture, right? So long as those kind of decisions are taken and that is implemented on-prem, the cloud vendors seamlessly support a combined hybrid architecture. The other important aspect is that if there is a legacy application which cannot be modernized, cannot be moved to cloud, many times what we recommend is just move the front end, the authentication service as a microservice to cloud. And then once, whether it's an interfacing application or it's a direct user, once the user is authenticated, the actual mid and back functionality is delivered by the on-prem application, right? So these are the different ways, but this decision has to be taken. And this is what we called as 6R. If I quickly cover the 6R, basically an on-prem application today could either be retained on-prem, and I have explained just now how it will work with cloud, or we could retire, that means just kill the application. It cannot survive in the target state, or we could rehost, which is the best scenario, where we just pick, lift and shift and put it on cloud. Then that leaves us with 3 other R's, right? One, we may re-platform. That means we may convert an application or migrate an application from mainframe, for example, to Java, or we may convert the database technology from current Oracle to say an Aurora serverless on AWS and so on, right? That is what we call as re-platform. Or we could refactor the application, which means that we don't change the business functionality, but we will have to modernize it, containerize it, make it microservices architecture driven, and so on and so forth, right? And then they can be migrated to cloud, or we may have to re-architect it, which means we'll have to build the application grounds up. So this is what we call as a 6R analysis, and that will help us decide what stays on-prem, what goes to cloud, and then we can have the hybrid target state, right? So in that process, I've also covered a few other design principles, like they have to be evolving, redundant, scalable, and so on. The primary focus there being that these applications have to be microservices architecture driven and as much as possible containerized. Now let's look at how do we take all these decisions, right? That's where the initial assessment phase I showed in the previous slide, the discovery framework, that comes in. And there are some excellent tools from AWS, for example, called the AWS Migration Hub, or Azure, which is called as Azure Migrate. What they actually do is they discover the current on-prem infrastructure, the number of servers, the storage, database, the couplings between the data and the applications, and so on. And they will give that report, which can be analyzed for us to take all these decisions, on-prem versus cloud, modernization, and so on, right? We already spoke about the lean architecture of microservices, containerization. I think a lot of these points I covered. We have to leverage the serverless architectures that function as a service, which is very, very helpful to provide a managed services function to the bank so that they don't need to focus on the infrastructure provisioning. They just focus on core business, right? Those kind of frameworks should be leveraged. We also spoke about the API enablement and data modeling solution. So in summary, a whole lot of focus goes towards discovering the current portfolio, understanding their monolithic and complex state, and taking this final decision in terms of how we have the on-prem versus cloud target state. The next challenge is around security and reliability. And I will not go into a great depth in the interest of time, but one thing I would like to tell you that all the cloud vendors provide multiple depths of defense, right from the network access through, say, a virtual private connection, or a dedicated pipe from the on-prem to the data center of the cloud provider. Right from there, we go into firewalls, we go into application level access, we go into various other access controls at various levels, which will ensure that there is security, right? And then from a reliability perspective, there are multiple auto healing functions available from various clouds, where the moment one existing server goes down, automatically a replicated server comes up and seamlessly restores the service. And this also can be leveraged for load balancing. Coming to the explosion of services, at DXC Luxoft, we have created a specialized framework to assess the readiness of a client for cloud migration and to assess which would be the right vendor for them, be it Amazon, Google, Microsoft. And this is based on a 7-parameter assessment, right? So we look at various aspects, such as, say, the support model provided by the cloud vendor, the architecture of the cloud vendor, the various other features that are available towards compliance, and so on and so forth. Okay, so based on that, we can very clearly do an objective assessment of how the cloud vendor fits the purpose for the bank, and then choose that vendor. Cultural change perspective. So we spoke about what kind of cultural changes have to be brought in to adopt cloud. And I think the best way, in our experience, is to do an organization change management to establish what we call a cloud operation model, where a lot of agile thinking has to come in, self-service thinking has to come in, the trust on cloud vendors of doing a good job in terms of security and so on has to come in. So it's a journey. But I think once this kind of consulting help is given to the banks, they are able to achieve that cultural change. Okay, many of the banks may not adopt the transformation because they feel it's very expensive or costly, and that's why the very first step is we help them do the total cost of ownership analysis. And then a lot of efficiency tools are there which helps to make this whole transformation very efficient, right? There are multiple migration automation tools, right? There are tools and services from, say, Amazon or Azure, which can help us replicate thousands of servers overnight from on-prem on cloud, right? Or migrate databases from on-prem to cloud. So there are many such features available which can be leveraged, and the cost of this transformation can be optimized. I think we already spoke about the complex and hybrid target state solutions. We also spoke about data complexity. One point I would like to highlight here is that, again, cloud vendors provide many interesting solutions for, say, data encryption at rest and in transit, data residency, say, for example, regions like Switzerland or Singapore, which have their own data confidentiality requirements, masking solutions, so on and so forth, right? Many solutions available, and that can be addressed. And finally, when it comes to multi-cloud orchestration, again, there are fantastic products in the market today. One example is RightScale, which can, just with a simple web interface, abstract a lot of these underlying different cloud platforms, right? So, for example, if the bank and the IT team in the bank needs to provision a server, from this web interface, it will look like a server, but underlying it could be an Amazon EC2, it could be an Azure virtual machine, and so on, right? So a lot of this abstraction is provided. So in summary, we have seen what is the ordeal, a lot of challenges, but we have also seen now that there are a rich set of solutions combined with our experience as DXC Luxoft and the solutions provided by these various cloud vendors that can help trivialize to a large extent this transformation journey and help a bank transform. Okay, if the audience here wishes to dirty their hands in cloud transformation programs and projects, this is a snapshot of what are the hottest technologies and skills that you would need to upskill yourself. And I would say this is not all comprehensive. This is an ever-growing list, but in our experience, we feel that these are the most popular. Okay, you may have a question, what kind of roles you can explore if you want to take up cloud transformation programs. I think some of these roles are already known to you, like Scrum Master, BA, and so on, but there are some specific cloud roles as well, like a cloud architect, cloud developer, cloud security architect, and so on. And these are like specialization on cloud technologies. And if you can gain these skills either through certifications from the cloud vendors or through your own hands-on experience, that can definitely help you get into the cloud space. Okay, finally, very quickly, I'll put all these concepts into action by taking you through one case study, right? So this is one of our clients whose problem statement was like this, right? So they had extensive number of overnight batches running with primary two objectives. One, they were trying to consolidate the information from multiple trading systems so that they could reconcile all this information. And number two, they were also trying to enrich this information to generate regulatory reports, which had to be provided to regulatory agencies. If delayed, they would result in penalties on the bank. So these two objectives were being achieved by their overnight batches. They were very huge, requiring extensive compute and storage requirements and memory requirements and so on. And they were using an on-prem TIBCO grid infrastructure, right? But their challenge was, in spite of that, their batches were consistently overrunning. They were getting delayed. Their reports were getting delayed. And they were not able to justify the need to upgrade this on-prem infrastructure because they were not able to indicate what is the actual return on investment that they've already made. What is the cost in dollars per individual trade or per risk run, so that they could go and then justify that this has to be enhanced. On top of that, they had a compounding problem that there was an organization drive to close down data centers. So they were already struggling, and then this closing down was further restricting the compute power they had on-prem, right? And they were also under pressure to demonstrate that they can extract more value from the current cost. So how did DXC Luxoft help them? The very first step that we did is we redesigned their grid architecture. How we did that? We leveraged this feature called cloud bursting. So the idea here is that you don't need to completely migrate the on-prem workflow to cloud or workloads to cloud. What we need to do is we need to leverage what we call as intelligent DNS service, domain naming service, available from these cloud vendors. So in this case, it was Microsoft Azure. So there's something called as Azure DNS. So what this does is, based on set criteria on thresholds of the load, for example, it intelligently switches the traffic from on-prem infrastructure to cloud infrastructure. And another key requirement there is we have to ensure the required security, right? And that's where we went with the solution of what we call as Azure Express Route, which establishes a dedicated pipe between the client on-prem and the Microsoft data center. That ensured that it's absolutely secure. So this was the first step we did. We redesigned using these features of Azure. On top of that, it was a big cultural change for them, as we saw earlier, right? Because they were very much used to this on-prem infrastructure. So we had to work with them to establish this operating model where we could integrate cloud into their existing day-to-day procedures, right? And obviously, all the other fault tolerance and good features that Azure has were leveraged. Okay, so what did we achieve? What did the bank achieve with this? Number one, they now had a lot of flexibility to decide how much capacity to allocate for a particular trade or risk run based on the SLA impact, right? I told you, right, that if there is a delay in delivering the report, there'll be a penalty. So this was varying across the different reports. So they were able to choose, say, a larger pool of capacity in the grid, which is combined the Azure cloud infrastructure and on-prem, if the SLA is high, or they could reduce this capacity allocation if the SLA requirement was a little more relaxed. So with this kind of an approach and with very clear charging patterns from Azure, they were able to also demonstrate the cost of compute. So they were actually able to tell exactly this is the price for this particular run, which was a challenge for them earlier, right? And on top of that, obviously they were able to meet all their SLAs now because they had this flexible cloud capacity to scale in and scale out. They were also able to demonstrate this particular program as a role model program within the bank. And then many other departments from the bank started following that, right? So in summary, we were able to solve their problems by leveraging some of these cutting edge solutions from Microsoft Azure. So with that, I would like to conclude this session I know it has been like a breeze through because of the constraint of time, but I think you would have got a perspective that definitely it is an ordeal for a bank with its legacy estate to transform to cloud, but there are a multitude of solutions from our experience and the cloud vendors to help them meet this challenge and get into the target state and achieve all the key drivers that we spoke about earlier, and hence be a very good business partner to their clients in the industry in general. So thanks a lot. I hope you enjoyed it. And I hand it over to Giri to take us through the next session. Thank you.
Thank you, Balaji, for your insightful section. I received some positive feedback from our audience for your sharing. So thank you so much for that. Now we will moving on to the last section, but also a really interesting one. Let me introduce Giri, who is currently managing the Global Delivery Center in India for CLM and Fenango practice. And Giri, the stage is yours now.
Thank you all. Thank you, Johan. Good evening to everyone. Thanks for waiting for patiently. That's a great session, Balaji. Can you stop presenting? I can take over. Thank you. Okay, so my name is Giridhar Narasanna, and I have over 20 years of IT experience, predominantly working on the BCM industry, banking and capital markets, primarily on Murex, Calypso technologies, and now I'm managing the Finargo practice, Finargo community of practice in Luxoft since 3 years. We'll quickly go through what is our today's. Sorry, just a sec. Okay, so today I am going to talk about my practice. That is globally we call it as CLM practice, and we are currently managing Finargo as a biggest application. As a preferred partner for platinum partner for Finargo, and we are managing the global delivery center from Bangalore. So I am presenting the Finargo COP today. So as part of the agenda, we'll quickly go through CLM and KYC and see what Finargo is offering in KYC, and then look at how Finargo fits into the entire financial services ecosystem, and then something about Finargo technology, what it's made up of, and how it's working, and few examples of careers available at Luxoft Finargo practice. Okay, so we all know CRM mostly. So what is this CLM? Is a always we think of, right? So CLM is client lifecycle management, whereas you know already CRM. So I don't need to explain, but CRM mostly focuses on the client data, and CLM focuses on client itself. Okay, so it's focused on the entire chain of transactions, client transactions, and designed to produce easily digestible reports or results. Client lifecycle management is an analytical process for the managing the entire client lifecycle end-to-end journey, from the prospect to start with and converting a client into and making them onboarding, and then the client due diligence and ongoing due diligence, and then managing them, bookkeeping, and then re-engaging in the entire life cycle, and then at the end offboarding as well. So entire client lifecycle management is called as CLM in the financial institution. So it all starts with prospecting stage. So where we find the prospects, right? So if I give an example from a bank, so it's looking for an investor, right? So or a banking client. A client can be an individual, or sometimes it's an organization, it's a corporation. So nurturing them and converting them, and then the onboarding starts. And that's where the most important client data activities, the collecting the client data starts. And the team working and strict compliance to keep the data secure. And then the managing the entire data end to end, 360-degree client view, and then servicing them, starting from the products to the transactions, and then re-engaging them in the entire client lifecycle management, with offering new products or new type of transactions over the period, and keeping the records up to date, and finally offboarding the client. Okay, why it is important? Why it's why it is important? Apologies. Are you able to see my screen? Is it correct?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, okay. So why it is important? The CLM is needed in the financial industry or a financial institution. It can be a bank or insurance or a capital markets or a corporate bank or a private wealth management bank. Any financial institution in that case. So it all started with a simple process in US. It's called as US Patriot Act in 2001. And then there is increasingly more and more complex regulations coming into the picture to protect the client. Okay, so and the exponential regulations came after the 2008 Lehman Brothers issue, right? So that's when there are many new regulations and new classifications have started coming into, and that's the start. And we see today there are many regulations that come every day. See, today, if you ask me, on due to COVID-19, there is a new um, Payment Protection Act program by US. So which has to be like, it just 1 or 2 days the banks have been forced to implement. And there are these are the starting with GDPR, with MiFID, with FATCA, and all those are just start of the regulations. And added to the bigger type of, like, if you go into the complexity, if you like trading multiple accounts, like different trading into different products, complex products, trading from different jurisdictions, multiple jurisdictions, like someone trades from India, someone trades from US. So all these jurisdictions, and to compete the market speed, right? So that's the big point. And every time you have to make sure that your customer is genuine. So that's where important point of this KYC comes into picture. So, and over and above, as I said, each country has different regulations coming in every now and then, and your KYC system has to get into that as per the new regulations. And if there is any breach, or if they don't implement within the time, we might be seeing like the recent RBI regulatory fines of 14 crores for 14 different banks in July. Or if you go into the back, an AML breach for over 10.4 billion US dollars for various banks around the world in just 2020. Okay, Goldman Sachs was fined 6.8 billion in 2020 for breaching all these CLM processes. So in this slide, if you look at the down arrows, each arrow is, if we consider as a individual department in a bank or a financial institution, or sometimes it will be more than one selection entry. It can be a single relationship manager, okay, who prospects the client and then take the initial data and risk analysis from his side and then sends to the client onboarding team. And onboarding team is completely from the start onboarding, coordination, collecting the data, and then it starts the client due diligence over the all these different arrows. And then once the client onboarding risk analysis done, and then ongoing ODD, what we call it is ongoing due diligence will start. So that's part of the servicing. And finally, you are offboarded, exit. So this is the whole process, which from as a client, I may not be like able to see on the back office of a bank, right? But this goes into details. So just on our area where we focus on KYC is, as we all know, as on today, means many of us follow KYC, right? It's mandatory, and every year we do the KYC. It's in Indian RBI or Indian government rules. We have to do it, and know your customer, and sometimes it's called as know your client. Most of us, we do it for Paytm or PhonePe, that they are regularly asking all these details. It's a check is the mandatory for process for identifying and verifying the client's identity, the genuine client, the identifying the right client. Okay. And then if there is any problem with the KYC, either your account will not be opened or they might stop your relationship, right? So that's the whole importance of the KYC and how it's Finergo is helping here. So when someone, me as a customer, as an entity, what we call it as a legal entity, it can be an individual or a company or a government department or something. When we go to a investor's bank and ask for some transaction related banking or in this case it's a bank, or any kind of an account opening, and then the whole process starts. So first, when someone welcomes you at the reception, a relationship manager asks for a few documents, and then it's submitted to the back office team, and back office team checks the data, completes the forms, and checks the completeness of the documents. They do the due diligence completely. Okay. And then they send it to another department, operations. This is traditionally how it's happening without Finergo. That's what I'm trying to explain. Okay. So operations team again checks with, primarily it checks the data and then calls the client again and asks for more information. And once they are satisfied with the information, that is sent to the legal team to verify the AML or any other legal complications that have with the particular legal entity. And then the compliance team also checks the risk rating, and then they will finally say, okay, this client is genuine, go ahead, or approves or rejects, and operations team feeds back to the relationship manager. What are the challenges in this current without a KYC application of Finergo in this case? The time taken by each of these departments is growing. Okay, so as there is repeated connections to the client, that makes slow process, and also client gets like irritated every time, saying that means why you are coming for new information, or why don't you ask at once, right? So that's a kind of slowness. Overall, it takes time. Okay, every time they go back, ask for different information, or different departments come and ask for the same information. And then there are few issues like false positives. What it means is, like, for example, Giridhar Narasimha, there are many Giridhar Narasimha, and sometimes a PEP or a sanctions on some person may stop my, as a genuine customer, they may stop my account opening or a transaction. Okay, And this follows a poor data. Sometimes we don't pass the right data, and then a poor analysis, and finally a risk rating is false again. Okay, and this makes more problem as it goes on ongoing due diligence. This is where Finergo comes in to help, and it's all an out of the box solution and few customizations later at the client side. So new request as usual, it's manual process. Relationship manager feeds into a new customer form, and then it is sent to different stakeholders. In this case, an operations team, and then a legal team, and risk assessment team, and classifications, and revive and approval. All this happens on the workflows continuously, and each function stakeholder is responsible for approving all these processes. And it all, if you see, look at the right side of the slide, it all falls on from prospecting to the offboarding. So all these processes. With Finergo, the advantage is it's digitally orchestrates every aspect of client lifecycle journey, every transaction, from initial prospecting to digital account opening, through the maintenance, refresh, new product onboarding, ongoing due diligence, and client offboarding. All this happens digitally. And Finergo dynamically manages all the client type of, or there is a change of product type or a customer journey across onboarding and originating. It's for all segments of the clients and the products. It offers omni-channel onboarding and account maintenance by integrating with different channels, or every channel in the or the front end systems of all the internal systems. It also connects with every financial stakeholder who is responsible for approving or rejecting an application. And then it takes care of the entire CLM process straight through processing, and streamlines the journey and delivering within the time specified by SLAs or the regulations. So this integrates with a host of internal systems and external data providers with industry standard technology for convenience, with advanced APIs. And more important now, it's becoming more digital, and now we have a digital data capture and verification technology within Finergo for convenience with OCR and NLP technologies. Different business rules, risk-based approach for compliance and regulatory through entire CLM process with inherent country-specific regulations for over 90 countries are inbuilt as a boxed application. It's in the box. And the best part, it is available on cloud, it is available on premises. So how it fits into a bigger financial services industry or an institution, right? Means if you if it's a investment bank, or from retail bank to investment bank, so there are multiple applications. The center, the dotted red line is the CLM practice, and where we get the data, the downstream, upstream systems are on the left and right side. So we get the data from the entity data, Alacra, the compliance product, and Evox data, and KYC utilities like Clarient and Market. Clarient again from Thomson Reuters. AML data, FircoSafe is mostly used, and WorldCheck is again the popular AML application. And mainly the industry data also, because many of these the clients or legal entities are coming from as an industry body or a company or an corporate, right? So the market and Omgeo or the applications that comes to help here. And we talked about CRM. So CRM, mostly Salesforce. It has an integrated API to connect with Salesforce and with Microsoft Dynamics CRM as well. And that's where we get the client onboarding data. And once it is in the CRM application, then our Finergo application take over, and then the process all the previously explained steps. And how this Finergo as a KYC data or an reference data helps the upstream systems like Calypso, Murex, Wall Street systems. So that's how it's connected with all the financial institution applications. It is .NET technology based application and client and desktop web-based application. Works with most of the popular browsers. Application server, again, a few examples. It works with SQL, SQL, MS SQL, and Oracle database as well. And the integration primarily happening on JRE. Wildfly is the application written in Java for connecting to different applications within the bank or external data providers. And Apache Camel is recently introduced as an integration manager. And as I said, SQL is the primary database, and it supports Oracle as well. Elasticsearch for the different search engine options. So as an architecture, high level, as I said, the client browser on the top, and we have an application that is on the server side, a presentation layer, business logic tier, and we have a data tier. So if you see the web API connecting to the web browser or the external, again, the extensibility. And then you have business logic, rules engine, workflows for different functional stakeholder to approve or reject, as we discussed, or authorize, in other words, and data tier with ORM to connect with Oracle, and then the search engines and the underlying SQL database again. And we have a report server, and we can build the report, and it can be used for different reporting tools as well. So what we have in Afo for you as a career at Luxoft, you can be a business analyst. What we call in Finergo is a product consultant. Once a business analyst is expertise in Finergo application from in most of the modules, and then we call them as a product consultant. And what we need to be on the right side, and a technical consultant, in general, it's a developer, but it goes more than developer, a solution architect, entire delivery manager, everybody comes under that segment. We do the post-production or go live support as well, that is a technical support, and we do the test or quality analysis as well. So these are the roles and responsibilities, and how what you should know to be a Finergo consultant or a Finergo, you want to have a Finergo job, then these are the options that we have at currently at Luxoft Finergo COP. And that's it. Thank you. I hope I try to finish on time. Thank you everyone for your time and the patience.
Thank you so much, Giri, for your informative session. And thank you all participation who are still stay with us until now. So our speaker already tried to cover all of your questions in our Q&A box. But if you have any other questions, please raise your question now before I will announce the winner for today's lucky draw. I think we have two other questions in Q&A box. So
Yeah.
speaker,
So hi Piyush. Yes, we do have Finargo BA opening. You can refer to our career portal. There are few options available. And Chandrasekharan, with respect to client on how many places that data get siloed, how the changes to the KYC client end captured by Finargo or other CRM apps. I'm not sure what you are saying, Chandrasekharan, but it looks like how it is captured or means it's an interface between the CRM applications. Like as I said, Salesforce, we have already tested inbuilt API, advanced API, which connects to CRM applications, and we take the required data from the CRM applications.
yeah.
Okay. SAP. Mohan, I think you have to look for bigger our parent company DXC for SAP practice. In Luxoft, I think we don't have. Madhu, if you have anything on this.
No, Giri, we are not focusing on SAP requirements. Definitely DXC is, but as a Luxoft, we are not focusing on SAP.
Okay, Adnan, it's all inbuilt. We have risk assessment and the classification and the auditing as well. So it's a modules inside and then the reporting accordingly. So the security is again as it's an important aspect. So we follow that based on the classification of the application. Competitors are many. We have big challenge. Means as a bigger organization like CLM practice, we work with the competitors as well. So iMeta is one of them, and Pega is also we work with Pega in Luxoft. Pega is also a competitor. There are a few other applications which are also a big competition to Finargo.
Yep. Thank you so much, Giri. I think we are running out time for Q&As. So I will announce our winners for today's lucky draw. For the JBL Gold 3, I would like to congratulations to Anton Thomas. And for 5 Luxoft branded backpack, I would like to send a congratulations to Morgan Kumar, Mihir J. Doshi, Sandeep, Raja Gokun, and Vikas Solanki. So I will reach out to all of the winners via emails, and then I will asking for the shipping details. And to all, thank you so much for joining today's section. Have a good evening, stay safe, and see you all again in our next webinar. Good night and goodbye.
Thank you. Thanks
you
to
all.
all. Thank you. Bye.
Good night. Stay safe. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.